Hello, this is McD the Beast, and this is McD Sports 4 coming to you today with my Week 12 college football recap. Let's get into this. First game, we had a Tuesday game, Western Michigan versus Ball State. Ball State gets the win in overtime, 42-41. Good win for Ball State, playing for pride at this point. So that's always good if you're playing for pride, get a win. Western Michigan, they already had everything locked up going into this week, basically. They're going to be a bowl team. So we'll see what they do, but in the bowl game. But at this point, Western Michigan's probably just coasting to the end of the regular season next week. But good for Ball State at home in double overtime. Next we have Ohio beating the crap out of Buffalo 52-17. Good win for Ohio at home. They think they have a shot in the MAC still, which they do. So if Buffalo loses their next game next week, I forget who they're playing. They will have a shot in the for the MAC championship. Ohio, Buffalo. I wish Buffalo didn't lose this game, but they did, only because it makes it really harder for Buffalo. I thought we were going to have a really good MAC championship, two undefeated MAC teams, Buffalo and Northern Illinois, but now we're not, since Northern Illinois lost. And speaking of Northern Illinois, they lost to Miami, Ohio, 13-7. Good win for Miami, Ohio on the road. They're trying to get into a bowl game. If they win next week, they're in one. Northern Illinois, they look like they're going to be an 8-4 team most likely, primarily due to the out of conference schedule, not because of they're playing the MAC, but a bit disappointing Northern Illinois, especially at home. I thought they would get the job done in this one. Now to the Thursday games. Toledo versus Kent State. Toledo takes care of business. They're going bowling this year as they win 56-34. Toledo, good win for them on the road. Wait for them to go bowling. Kent State, you do have Central Michigan that's worse than you at this time, so that's good. But Kent State's not a good football team. Next game, Tulane versus Houston. Houston gets the 48-17 win over Tulane. This was a big game in the American. If Tulane got the win, they could have been going to the American Championship, but Houston got the win. Blowout win by Houston. The big story in this one, though, is that Ed Oliver, one of the top prospects for the NFL draft and the head coach for the Houston Cougars, Major Applewhite, they got into a beef on the sideline. I don't really care because I think this is going to drop Oliver's stock a little bit. He's been injured kind of all year. I think he's kind of been just being cautious. He's been using his caution because he thinks that sort of like what Joey Bosa's doing, just kind of skipping the year, maybe play a few games to show that he still has it. But outside of that, Houston, this was a good win. Tulane still has a shot to go bowling next week if they get the win. Next game, North Texas beats Florida Atlantic 41-38. Good win for North Texas at home. Florida Atlantic gave them everything they could handle. Florida Atlantic, if they win next week, they still go bowling. So next week for Florida Atlantic is a must-win. North Texas, good win for them at home. Let's see what they do in their bowl game. They'll go either 8-4, 9-3. I don't know who these teams are playing next week. I know next week is rivalry week as well. Number 20 Friday games. Number 25 Boise State beats New Mexico 45-14. Good job by Boise State. They look like they are going to possibly be in the Mountain West Championship if Utah State loses to them next week. That game is huge. Boise State versus Utah State, in my opinion. New Mexico, as I said, they're not that good of a football team. I've been saying that the whole year, and they proved it to me last night on Friday night. But good win for Boise State on the road. Next, Memphis beats SMU 28-18. SMU, they were in this game until the last few minutes, but SMU, they still have a shot to go bowling next week. They gotta win next week. Memphis, at this point, you're basically next week is irrelevant if you win or lose because you're going to probably be placed in a similar, if not the same, bowl game at this point. This season, you got to mark that as a little bit disappointing for Memphis, but it happens. So, but good win for Memphis on the road. Now to the Saturday games. The title versus number one Alabama. Number one Alabama wins this game 50-17. I'm going to speak about Alabama in a second, but that's the title. I'm going to give them a lot of credit for staying in this game for a half. This game was tied at 10-all at halftime. So I'm going to give this title a lot of credit here because they looked. I had a few people texting me, is Alabama going to really lose to this title or this title? And I was like, no, they won't lose, but you got to give them a lot of credit. Number one, Alabama, I don't know what the hell they were doing in the first half. I know they were looking ahead of this game next week to Auburn, which should be a win for them. But I don't know what the hell Alabama was doing in the first half of this game. They're lucky they pulled away in that third quarter, big league. So, good win for Alabama. But my God, I might even consider switching Alabama to Clemson after this one. Even though Clemson got off to a slow start as well. Speaking of Clemson, number 2 Clemson beats Duke at home 35-6. Very impressive win for Clemson. I thought Duke could give them some problems. And some people are like, oh, Clemson's looking ahead to South Carolina. Why would Clemson be looking ahead to South Carolina? I know it's in Williams-Brice, but don't tell me they're looking ahead to South Carolina because South Carolina. Remember the Georgia game? When you were put on the national spotlight. Yeah, it's going to be something similar to that next week. But anyways, good win for Clemson at home. They absolutely dominated the second, third, and fourth quarters. Duke, at this point, they're just coasting to the end of the year as they are going to be in a bowl game. Number 12 Syracuse versus number 3 Notre Dame. Notre Dame wins this game 36-3. The quarterback for Syracuse, a starting quarterback, I forget his name, got injured in the first 5 minutes of this game, and Syracuse didn't have any offense going for them, and Notre Dame just never looked back. This game was almost a shutout. Syracuse did get that field goal with like 10 seconds left. This game was at Yankee Stadium, by the way, so it was a neutral site game. But good win for Notre Dame. I had Syracuse beating them, but that didn't happen, obviously. But we'll see what Notre Dame does. They have USC next week that on the road. That could be a loss. I'll be a little bit leery though. If I was Notre Dame in a rivalry game like that. Syracuse at this point. Hopefully they go 9-3. So we'll see what happens. Next game, Indiana versus number 4 Michigan. Michigan gets the 31-20 win. A lot of these teams got off to a slow start. Same with Michigan here, but they pulled through. They played well late, and they got the 31-20 win. They have a big time game on the road against Ohio State next week in the game. I will be watching that game. Indiana, I think that Indiana, if they win next week against Purdue, they'll be in a bowl game, but I don't know if they're gonna win next week against Purdue per se, but I think Michigan, as long as they win out, because I think whoever comes out of the East will be winning the Big Ten championship over Northwestern. So as long as Michigan wins out, they're in the college football playoffs, in my opinion. Next game, UMass versus number 5 Georgia. Georgia, the only team that didn't get off to really a slow start. They win this game 66-27. Good win for Georgia. The defense looked a bit shaky though, probably because they were playing second stringers for most of the game. UMass, their season is over. They're 4-8. Not a horrible season, but not that good of a season for UMass. Kind of what I expected, to be honest. Georgia, they get to play Georgia Tech next week. That could be a bit of a tricky game against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's not that bad of a football team, so expect Georgia Tech to at least stay in that one for about 3 quarters. But Georgia, they should be winning out, and we'll see what they do against Alabama in the SEC championship. Number 6 Oklahoma beats Kansas 55-40. Oklahoma, good lord, they did not look good in this game. They let Kansas score a lot of points on them, and I'm telling you this right now, I'll be leery to even pick Oklahoma to even make the college football playoffs at this point, even if they are a one-loss team in the Big 12 champion, one loss team, I will be a bit leery because of the performances like this. They get West Virginia next week. They could lose that game as well. Kansas, good performance. You get Les Miles as your head coach next year. I already have a video up for that. Go check that out on the McD Sports 4 YouTube channel. But Kansas, they looked at. I was surprised they put up 40 points. I'll admit. Number 7, LSU. They beat Rice 42-10. Good win for LSU at home. Taking care of business, of course. Rice, they'll 1-11 as their final record. My opinion about that is basically is what we were expecting. I think I had Rice at 1-11 too, going into the season in my season predictions. Number 8, Washington State beats Arizona 69-28. Big win for Washington State at home. This was an impressive win on the mindset that Washington State, they gotta be blowing out these teams if they even want to get into the college football playoffs. I think Washington State is being a bit disrespected. Their only loss was on a questionable call against USC. If they would beat USC, they would be in the college football playoffs. They get Washington next week at home. They should win that game. Not a complete lock though, but I think they'll probably end up beating them. And then they'll probably get Utah or somebody in the Pac-12 championship. So as long as they win out, they could have a shot in the college football playoffs. Arizona, they have a shot against Arizona State next week to go bowling. Let's see what they do. But this had more to do with Washington State getting out there and blowing out a team. Number 9, West Virginia loses on the road to Oklahoma State 45-41. Let's talk about Oklahoma State first. They're going bowling this year. You gotta say this season for Oklahoma State's been a bit of a disappointment, but they've whenever they played at home against good teams, they showed up. So you gotta give them that. They beat West Virginia, so they beat a top 10 team. If you're West Virginia though, your season, unless you beat Oklahoma and basically beat them in the Big 12 championship, and then you could get into a New Year's Six Bowl. But I think your aspirations for the college football playoffs are over. They're over as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see what happens. But good win for Oklahoma State at home. Next game, number 10, Ohio State beats Maryland in overtime, 52-51. And Maryland, I'm a Terps fan, and this game pissed me off as a Maryland fan. If we would have hit that 2-point conversion, if Pigmore would have just thrown the ball to the guy instead of throwing it to the side of the wide open guy, Ohio State's season would be over. So it came that close for Ohio State. They really did not play well at all defensively in this game. Give the Terps credit though, where credit is due. They looked well offensively. Their defense sucked, by the way. And one other thing I would say about Maryland is we have Penn State next week on the road. Probably won't win that game, but hey, you never know. But I'm telling you, Ohio State is lucky to win this game. They were lucky to win this game, Ohio State. So they got the job done, which is always great. Next game, number 24 Cincinnati versus number 11 UCF. UCF gets the 38-13 win over Cincinnati. Good win for UCF at home. They're probably going to be the American champions. They're going to be facing Houston, it looks like, in the American Championship. That should be a win for them. Cincinnati, I thought they would come out a bit stronger than they did, but for a Cincinnati fan, your take this season on the mindset that they have not been this good in a while, Cincinnati. Number 13, Florida beats Idaho 63-10. Good win for Florida. They came out swinging. They were really the only team that came out swinging this whole day. So good win for them. They get to play Florida State next week. We'll see what they do against Florida State. I think they probably will win that, but we'll see what happens. But good win for Florida. Number 14, Penn State versus Rutgers. Penn State gets the 20-7 win over Rutgers. Rutgers is the worst team. They did play Penn State tough. I'll give them that. But Penn State got off to a slow start. That's why this game was close. And it's closer than it should be. Good win for Penn State. They get Maryland next week. Hopefully they could go 9-3. I hope they don't. I hope it's 8-4 because I'm a Terps fan. But we'll see what they do. Next game, number 15 Texas beats number 16 Iowa State 24-10. Good win for Texas at home. They still have a if they still have a shot at the Big 12 as well, because if West Virginia beats Oklahoma, I think Texas has the tiebreaker against Oklahoma because of the head-to-head matchup. So Texas still has a shot. They need West Virginia to beat Oklahoma next week. So we'll see what happens. I personally think that Texas, I give it like a 50-50 that they're in the Big 12 championship. Iowa State, their season's over. Still a bowl team, but I'll say this about Iowa State: they are probably one of your best teams in the Big 12, and they're probably one of your better teams in college football. You should be really 7-4, going on to 8-4. So we'll see what happens, but it was a decent season from Iowa State. Next, number 17 Kentucky, they beat Middle Tennessee 34-23. Good win for Kentucky. They needed this. It was a good win for them. Middle Tennessee is not a bad team at all, and so they got the job done at home. They get Louisville next week. Kentucky, that should be a win. So Kentucky will finish the season 9-3, and we'll see where the committee places them. I don't think they'll be in the Sugar Bowl per se, but they'll be in a decent bowl game outside of the New Year's Six Bowl. Next, number 18 Washington versus Oregon State. Washington gets the 42-23 win. Good win for Washington, taking care of business. At this point, Washington needs to a lot of things to go their way. They want a shot at New Year's Six Bowl. Oregon State, basically they're playing for pride at this point. They get Oregon next week. That should be an L. They'll finish their season 2-10. Number 19, Utah beats Colorado in the snow, 30-7. Good win for Utah on the road in the snow. They look like the team that's going to be in your Pac-12 championship at this point against Washington State. Colorado at this point, they collapsed once they played Pac-12 play. Still have a shot next week to get into the to get into a bowl game. I believe they play UCLA. No, they play I forget who the hell they play actually. But I think they play one of the teams in the north, like Stanford or Cal or somebody. But we'll see what they do, Colorado. But they have to win if they want to get into a bowl game. Excuse me there. Next game, number 20 Boston College. They lose on the road to Florida State, 22-21. Big win for Florida State. If they beat Florida next week, they're in the bowl game. So watch out for that. I don't think it's going to happen though. Boston College at this point, I mean that Clemson game I think really killed their momentum, and we'll see what they do. I think they get Syracuse next week, Boston College, so we'll see what they do against them. But I think Florida State at this point, I still don't think Florida State's in a bowl game, but I'll give them credit for this win. They played well in this one. Boston College probably just in a decent bowl game at this point. Number 21, Mississippi State. They beat Arkansas 52-6. Big win for Mississippi State at home. They needed this one if they wanted to be placed in even a decent bowl game. Arkansas at this point, basically you get Missouri next week. That should be an L. You'll finish your season 2-10. Mississippi State, they get Ole Miss next week. That could be an L, but I'm going to say as of right now, Mississippi State gets by. Number 22, Northwestern. They beat Minnesota 24-14. Big win for Northwestern on the road. They're kind of your Big 12 champions at this point, though. They get Illinois next week. That should be a win, and they'll be 8-1 in the Big Ten, but they lose 3 out of conference games. Imagine if Northwestern won their out of conference games. They could probably be considered for at least a New Year's Six Bowl. Minnesota next week, I believe they get Wisconsin. That's probably going to be a loss, but you never know. They're playing for a bowl game next week, Minnesota, so they could play their asses off and get into one. But we'll see what happens. Number 23, Utah State gets by Colorado State. 29-24. Colorado State had a Hail Mary, but a penalty got thrown. The wide receiver stepped out of bounds before he caught the ball. That's not allowed. But anyways, good job for Utah State surviving that. They get a big game against Boise State next week. If they win that, and if UCF loses somewhere down the road, they should be considered, as long as they win their Mountain West Championship. If Utah State's 12-1, and if UCF is 12-1, I gotta go Utah State over UCF for the New Year's Six Bowl bid there. So good win. So good win for Utah State, keeping their hopes alive. Colorado State next year. Temple versus South Florida. Temple gets a 27-17 win. This was a tale of two halves here. South Florida blew a 17-0 lead over Temple. Temple at this point, if UCF loses a game, I know they'll still be in that seat for the American Championship, but Temple is probably your second best team in the American East at this point, even behind South Florida. I just look at them and probably even maybe behind Cincinnati as well. No, Cincinnati's probably even behind Temple at this point as well. Temple's 6-1 in the American, so Temple's playing great. We'll see what they do next week against, I believe they play East Carolina. Colgate versus Army. Army gets the 28-14 win. Good win for Army. As long as they continue winning, they'll be placing a good bowl game. Colgate, that was their first loss though, so good win for Army. That was a good Colgate team. Nebraska beats Michigan State 9-6. Good win for Nebraska at home. I did not think they're going to win this one. At this point, they're playing for Pride, Nebraska. I believe they get Iowa next week, Nebraska. So if they could get that victory, they'll be 5-7. Michigan State at this point, this was kind of disappointing. I think you get Rutgers next week. If I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you get Rutgers next week if you were Michigan State. That should be a win, and you'll finish your season 7-5. TCU versus Baylor. TCU gets the important 16-9 win over Baylor. Huge win for them. Both of these teams at this point will be playing for a bowl game next week. I forget who they play, but good win for TCU on the road. They needed this one. They wanted to have a shot at a bowl game. Baylor, they had a shot, but they'll get a shot next week. Pittsburgh versus Wake Forest. Pitt beats Wake Forest 34-13. It looks like Pitt's going to be in your ACC championship game, so that'll be interesting to watch. Wake Forest at this point next week, they're playing for a bowl game against NC State, I believe. Pitt at this point, as long as they beat Miami next week, they'll be fine. They'll be 8-4, so we'll see what happens. NC State beats Louisville 52-10. Good win for NC State. I think that NC State at this point, they'll just be in a bowl game. Louisville next year, they got to be thinking next year. Florida International beats Charlotte 42-35. Charlotte gave them everything they could handle, but at the end of the day, Florida International was the better team. I look at Florida International, they are probably one of your best teams in the Conference USA. Charlotte at this point, they got knocked out of bowl consideration, so they'll just be playing for Pride this next week, or for spoiler alert for next week. Old Dominion, they get the win over VMI 77-14. Good win for Old Dominion. They could play next week to go 5-7. Just playing for Pride at this point. If you're Old Dominion, it's a good win for them. Appalachian State beats Georgia State 45-17. Good win for Appalachian State at home. At this point, they look like they're going to be your Sun Belt East champions. Georgia State at this point, they're just a bad team playing for Pride. Marshall versus UTSA. Marshall gets the 23-0 win. Good dominant win for Marshall. I was pretty high on Marshall, but at the beginning of the season, but I've calmed down a little bit. UTSA at this point, they're going to be playing for Pride next week, trying to go 4-8. North Carolina gets their second win of the year against Western Carolina, 49-26. Good win for North Carolina at home. Win the ones that you can. Um, Western Carolina is an FCS opponent, so you always want to beat your FCS opponents. But good win for North Carolina. Let's see what they do next week against uh, Duke, I believe, or NC State. Arkansas State beats UL Monroe 31-17. Two bowl teams already clinching right here. So basically a decent, kind of like a bowl game, but good win for Arkansas State. Let's see what they do. Let's see what these two teams do in their bowl games. Nevada beats San Jose State 21-12. Good win for Nevada. They're trying to go. They are trying to go 8-4. They play UNLV next week, so they're trying to go 8-4 there. San Jose State, they're the worst team in the Mountain West in my opinion, because Nevada, it was blatantly obvious that Nevada was looking ahead to UNLV, but we'll see what happens next year for San Jose State. Nevada at this point though, they look like they have a nice program in Nevada down there. We know Nevada. Navy, they beat Tulsa 37-29. Good win for Navy at home. Two teams just playing for pride at this point, so I would have gave this one to Navy if I picked this one, because to me Navy, they still compete. Navy, as much as you don't want to admit it, they still compete. They're not that good of a football team, but they compete. So that's why I would have given it to Navy, especially at home. But good win for Navy at home. Troy takes care of Texas State 12-7. Troy obviously looking ahead next week against, I believe they play, I forget who they play, maybe UL Monroe maybe. But Troy, good win for them at home. Texas State gave them everything they could handle defensively. At this point, Texas State's playing for pride. I think they play UTEP next week. Or no, they play I forget who the hell they play. Texas State, maybe Arkansas State or somebody. So we'll see what they do, Texas State, but good win for Troy. Southern Miss, they stay alive as they beat Louisiana Tech 21-20. Good win for Southern Miss at home. They win next week. They are in against South Alabama. They are in a bowl game. Louisiana Tech at this point, they are just going to try to win that 8th game against a decent bowl game for being in the Conference USA. Wisconsin versus Purdue. Wisconsin wins this one 47-44. Good win for Wisconsin on the road. They got the job done. They get Minnesota next week. That should be a win, and they'll go 8-4, 6-3 in the Big Ten. Purdue next week, they're playing Indiana. Whoever wins that game's in a bowl game. So that's a huge game right there. We'll see what they do against them. I'll probably be watching games like that next week, though. Not the rivalry games, but like the games that have bowl implications on the line. So we'll see what Purdue does, but yeah, we'll just see what Purdue does. Bowling Green, they beat Akron 21-6. Kind of shocking here. Akron, they got a win now. They want to be in a bowl game. At this point, Bowling Green, they're just playing for pride, so that's what probably happened here. Akron's probably overlooking them. They get South Carolina coming up, Akron, so they probably won't be in a bowl game, but you never know. Georgia Tech, they beat Virginia 30-27. Good win for Georgia Tech. I thought they were, I picked Georgia Tech to win this game in the college pick'em, and they got the job done in overtime, which is great to see. Virginia next week, they get Virginia Tech. Not that good of a Virginia Tech team. Probably will beat them, actually, as Virginia Tech is probably playing for a bowl game. Or they might be out of a bowl game since they only have 11 games. We're going to give them that win against East Carolina, though, Virginia Tech. So we'll say they're playing for a bowl game, Virginia Tech. But I think Virginia beats them next week. But in Georgia Tech next week, they'll stay in that game against Georgia for 3 quarters, in my opinion. Miami, they beat Virginia Tech 38-14. Good win for Miami on the road. They're in the bowl game this year. Virginia Tech looks like they're not going to be in the bowl game this year. So we'll see what happens. But Miami gets Pitt next week. Virginia Tech gets Virginia. So we'll see what happens. But good win for Miami on the road. Kansas State versus Texas Tech. Kansas State keeps their bowl aspirations alive as they beat Texas Tech 21-6. Good win for Kansas State. Way to keep their bowl aspirations alive. Texas Tech, Next week is a must-win for Cliff Kingsbury because if he loses that game, he is out as head coach, I think. So next week, I don't know who they play, Texas Tech, but that is a must-win for them. Kansas State, same thing, must-win. Iowa, they beat Illinois 63 nothing. Good win for Iowa on the road. They get, I think, Nebraska next week. Let's see if they go 8-4. As your classic 8-4 team, Iowa. Illinois, they get Northwestern next week. That's probably at L. They'll finish their season 4-8. But Illinois, you gotta look at the positives. You won 2 Big Ten games. You were competitive in some of these games. So we'll see what happens. But good win for good. I would say this has been a decent season for Illinois. Missouri versus Tennessee. Missouri gets the 50-17 win over Tennessee. Good win for Missouri on the road. They get Arkansas next week. They'll go 8-4 in my opinion. Missouri. Tennessee. My God, next week you are playing to get into a bowl game. I thought Tennessee had a shot in this one, but they got absolutely ran out the building. So we'll see what happens. But Tennessee, they could beat Vandy. They could. They have a good shot at it, actually. UCLA, they beat USC 34-27. Good win for UCLA. They're playing basically for pride at this point, especially in a rivalry game like this. USC next week, they're playing Notre Dame to get into a bowl game. So I think USC will give them all they can handle Notre Dame, but Notre Dame will probably end up winning that game. Auburn, they beat Liberty 53-0. Good win for Auburn. They get Alabama next week. I'm interested to see what this defense does against Alabama. I don't think they're going to score anything, but I think they're going to be shut out by 31-0 sort of like the LSU game. But we'll see what Auburn does. Liberty at this point, you're just playing for pride probably at this point. Wyoming, they keep their bowl aspirations alive as they beat Air Force 35-27 in the snow. Good win for Wyoming. I believe you got Colorado State next week, if I'm not mistaken. So you'll probably get the win against them and get into a bowl game at 6-6. I told you Wyoming will be in a bowl game. Their back end of the schedule is easy. They could survive the front end of the schedule enough. Air Force at this point, they're playing for pride next week. So we'll see what happens. Georgia Southern, they beat Coastal Carolina 41-17. Good win for Georgia Southern on the road. Coastal Carolina playing for a bowl game next week, so we'll see what happens there. Louisiana beats South Alabama 48-38. Congratulations, Louisiana. You're going bowling. South Alabama at this point playing for pride. East Carolina beats UConn 55-21. East Carolina, my team's not that good of a team. We're going to say they're 3-8. We're going to give them that loss to Virginia Tech. UConn's worse, though. So, basically, I think UConn's the worst, one of the top 5 worst teams in college football, and East Carolina isn't too far behind them. They did get that win over North Carolina, though, East Carolina, so I'll give them credit on that. Texas A&M, they beat UAB 41-20. Good win for Texas A&M at home. UAB is a good team. They were in my rankings. They'll get kicked out of my rankings, but they're still a good team, UAB. But basically, Texas A&M, they get to play LSU next week at home. If they win that game, they're an 8-4 team. So that's a good start for Jimbo Fisher. Vandy, they get the oppressive overtime win over Ole Miss 36-29. Good win for Vandy at home. And they're going to be playing for a bowl game next week against Tennessee. So that game's a huge game. Vandy might come out and win that. So Vandy, how about that? Possibly have a shot at a bowl game next week. Ole Miss, they don't have a shot at a bowl game, but they're going to try to play spoiler against Mississippi State, even though they're in a bowl game away. So it's a rivalry game. Ole Miss will they'll play their asses off next week, but we'll see what happens. But my God, Vandy and Tennessee is a huge game next week, people. South Carolina, they get the win over Chattanooga 49-9. South Carolina's going bowling this year. Still have 2 games left because they're playing Akron on December 1st. So they could go 8-4 South Carolina, or how about 7-5 since they have Clemson next week. They'll go 7-5 probably, and they'll go from there. Western Kentucky, they beat UTEP 40-16. Good win for Western Kentucky. At this point, I think these two teams are playing for pride. So this game didn't really matter, but good win for Western Kentucky. BYU, they're going bowling this year as they beat New Mexico State 45-10. Good win for BYU at home. New Mexico State's probably one of your worst teams this year. All their wins are against FCS opponents in New Mexico. So basically, BYU, we'll see what they do in the bowl game, but good job for them. Fresno State, they beat San Diego State 23-14. Good win for Fresno State as they're trying to position themselves to face Utah State or Boise State in the Mountain West Championship. Or in San Diego State at this point, they're going to be playing to go 8-4. And then look ahead to next year probably as this season you got to mark up as a disappointment. Arizona State versus Oregon. Oregon gets the 31-29 win over Arizona State. I picked Arizona State in this one, and they just came up short, so that's kind of disappointing. Oregon and Arizona State should get wins next week against their opponents, Arizona for Arizona State and Oregon State for Oregon. So we'll see what happens, but both of these teams are going bowling no matter what. And then your last game, UNLV versus Hawaii. Hawaii, they get the 35-28 win over UNLV at home, and they are going bowling. I thought this one could have been a little bit of a question mark because Hawaii really hasn't been playing well lately. But they're going bowling, so they get a game next week. They'll go 7-6 or 8-5, and they're going to go bowling. So we'll see what happens. And then you had a game that got canceled, Stanford versus Cal, because of the California wildfires. So that's my reaction to Week 12 of college football. Comment down below if you think I missed anything. Also, please like and subscribe to this video, and please subscribe to my channel. That would be greatly appreciated. And this is McD the Beast signing off.